Cool. Guys, I'm working on this application, and all I am trying to do is to basically write in an attempt to try to show you how to actually read the MP4 file. There are a lot of things that you will need to understand about an MP4 file before you can actually be able to write a code that is able to explore that MP4 file. So as I have explained on one of my videos with MP4 files, is that MP4 files is composed of these smaller objects that we normally refer to them as atoms or boxes. It just depends on who would be actually talking about an MP4 file. But these small boxes, they have names, or they have type, and one of those boxes is the Ftyp. This is the most important box, and it is recommended by the specification that your file has this box at the beginning of the file, because this is the box that the player needs in order to be able to determine whether it's going to be able to play that file. So here we are going to look at what exactly is stored within the Ftyp box, and I have notified you that I will keep on changing this code as I go on, but I am going to go through each and every part of this code. There will never be any part that I'm going to leave out. I am going to take you through every part of the code, but I want for now to focus on this Ftyp, and the intention here is to really see how the data is actually placed within an MP4 file. Data is placed basically in a series of bytes, and that is how a computer stores data. And then you just need to know where is what. When you are looking for something, you have to know where it is put inside this box. Now, here we've created a method. We've started by creating a class called box, which is basically an object inside an MP4 file, and all the boxes, or most of the boxes, are going to inherit from this box, because all boxes actually contain box size. We need to know how long or big this box is, and box name, which is basically the type that identifies that box. Does that make sense? So we created a class that defines these two properties, box size and a string, which is the name of that box. So Ftyp, because it's a box, that means we are going to have to get the size of Ftyp and the name of Ftyp. So it inherits from box because it needs those two properties, and then it's got its own properties: major brand, minor brand, and compatible brands. This is the content that is stored inside this box. So we are going to look at how to read this data and get it out of the MP4 file, and be able to determine what exactly is this data and what it means. The major brand is basically an integer that identifies the specification, the version of the specification that this player can play. For example, the ISO media file specification, which is basically the standard that defines how MP4 files should be structured. It has different versions. These specifications, or these standards, it has different versions. Does that make sense? We have ISO 1, we have ISO version 2, we have ISO version 3. So it will depend on when the file was created, which specification was used, and which version of that specification was used, and what other specifications are compatible with that specification. I don't know if I make sense. When you create an MP4 file, you follow a set of rules. You follow a set of rules, a standard, a certain standard. So these standards, they also come in version. For example, if they make a standard, if the ISO makes a standard this year that, okay, this is how you should structure your MP4 file, probably after 3 years, they're going to improve that standard. They will make a new version of the same standard. So now when a player that I write today that implements the current standard may not be able to play a file that will be created by the next version of the standard. So it's important that when a player receives to play a file, it needs to know that, okay, which specification was used to create this file that I am about to play. Okay, this is the specification, and which version of that specification that was used to do this. And then from that information, it's able to tell whether, okay, I know I will be able to play this file or I won't be able to play this file, because sometimes the changes between versions can actually also impact whether players that implement a different version of the same specification can be able to play that file or not. So major brand gives us the version of the specification, the version of the standard that this player is implementing. Then we have minor brand. Minor brand also gives us the version of the standard. So as I'm saying, these standard, they come in different versions. You might have 5 versions of the same standard. Does that make sense? So you can, maybe let's say your player implemented the standard, the version 3 of the standard. So that means it won't be able to play files that were created with version 4.5. It may not, let me not say it won't, it may not be able to play files that were created with version 4 and 5 because it implements version 3, but it would be able to play files that were created with version 2 and 1. So those versions that it's able to play, we call them compatible brands. They are compatible brands. So that means if a file is created with one of the compatible brands, so this player is going to be able to do what? To play. It's raining outside here. I hope this is not disturbing. So the player that implements a certain version of a standard can be able to play other versions of the same standard. So all the versions that are compatible with the version that this player implements, we call them compatible brands. Does that make sense? Minor gives us the minor version of the standard that this player can be able to play. Does that make sense? So that's all of that information. When a file is created, would be put to the major brand and the minor brand compatible. Then the player will know, okay, which standard am I implementing and which version of this standard am I implementing. Then it can be able to determine from that information. It's able to determine, okay, I'll be able to play this file. If it's not able to play this file, then it can notify the user. What we are doing here basically is to implement a standard. Does that make sense? Right now, as I'm doing this, I am looking at the standard. So here we're going to just get all this information and put it inside this box.